Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Paris, France. My name is Munir Beltaifa, Vice President, Initiatives of Change International. It is an honor to welcome you to this crucial conference towards justice and peace in the Middle East. It is hosted by Initiatives of Change International, a global movement which for almost 100 years has sought to build trust across the world's divides, from healing the wounds of the past and fostering peace and reconciliation, to promoting ethical business and integrity in public life. I'm privileged to be here with all of you today as we gather to address one of the most enduring and contentious issues of our time. In times where global wealth increases, should we, citizens of the world, accept any justification of killing hundreds of thousands of civilians in Europe, Middle East, and elsewhere? Recent wars haven't led to peace. Too many hearts around the world are bleeding, and humanity needs more efficient diplomacy, moral rearmament, and better use of taxpayers' money through more honest conversations than use of military weapons. We are fortunate to have with us a panel of distinguished speakers who will provide us with invaluable insights and perspectives. First, we will hear from Professor Ilan Pappe, whose talk, Business as Usual or Needed Historic Change, will challenge us to reconsider the status quo and explore the necessity for transformative change in our approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Next, Mrs. Sabrine Abidullah will address the question, what needs to change to achieve a real peace process? Her insights will be crucial in understanding the practical and systemic shifts required to foster genuine peace. And finally, Professor Jeffrey Sachs will guide us in finding the pathways to peace, offering a strategic vision and actionable steps towards a sustainable and just resolution. Our conference takes place at a time when the international community is beginning to recognize the state of Palestine with recent endorsements from Ireland, Norway, and Spain. This momentum reflects a growing global consensus on the urgent need for justice and peace. Considering the ongoing humanitarian disaster and the violence inflicted upon Palestine, it is imperative that we address the severe injustices occurring under the pretext of self-defense. Now, more than ever, we must amplify the voices calling for justice, human rights, and an end to the suffering. As we engage in today's discussions, let us commit ourselves to the principles of justice, empathy, and unwavering dedication to peace. We must strive to transform the narrative from one of conflict and denial to one of understanding and reconciliation. It is now my pleasure to hand over to our esteemed moderator, my dear colleague, Dr. Maria del Pilar Griffin, member of Initiatives of Change International Council, joining from Seattle, Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beltaifa. It's a pleasure really to be here serving as a moderator in this meaningful event. For those who were in the first session, we reviewed some of the objectives, but we will review the objectives for this second session. The main objective of the session towards justice and peace in the Middle East Conference is to deepen the dialogue initiated in the first session by focusing on practical and collaborative approaches to resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This session also aims to, one, to identify actionable steps, explore and outline specific steps that can be taken by various stakeholders, including government, international organizations, civil society, and individuals to advance peace and justice in the region. We want to foster multi-stakeholder collaboration, encourage and accelerate collaboration among policymakers, academics, activists, and community leaders to create an unified and coordinated approach to addressing the conflict. Develop concrete strategies, formulate concrete approaches that address the root causes of the conflict, promote human rights, and ensure sustainable peace, This includes considering economic, social, political, and cultural dimensions. Leverage international momentum. Built on the recent recognition of the state of Palestine by Ireland, Norway, and Spain, and leverage this momentum to galvanize further international support and action towards a just resolution. We are searching to promote empathy and understanding, foster a deeper understanding and empathy among participants for the experiences and perspectives of all parties involved, recognizing the human impact of the conflict and the importance of addressing humanitarian needs. And finally, commit to a long-term engagement. Encourage a long-term commitment to peace-building efforts, recognizing that achieving justice and peace requires sustained efforts, resilient, and ongoing dialogue. So it's my pleasure now with these aims to welcome our first speaker for this second session, Professor Ilan Pappe. He is an Israeli and socialist activist. He's a professor of history at the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom, director of the University's European Centre for Palestine Studies, and co-director of the Exeter Centre for Ethno-Political Studies. He is the author of the best-selling The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. And I will list some of his books because when we were preparing for this event, I think that there is so much richness. So A History of Modern Palestine, The Modern Middle East, The Israel-Palestine Question, The Forgotten Palestinians, A History of the Palestinians in Israel, The Idea of Israel, A History of Power and Knowledge. And with Noam Chomsky, Gaza in Crisis, Reflection on Israel's War Against the Palestinians. He writes for The Guardian and the London Review of Books, among others. It is really an honor to hand over the word to Professor Ilan Pappe, who will challenge us to consider business as usual or needed historical change. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Pilar. And thank you very much for the initiatives of change, for the organization, for organizing this very important webinar. I'm so sorry I didn't catch up with the first session, but I'm sure we are continuing a very rich and useful discussion with the esteemed colleagues. I'm so happy to be with Sabrine on this panel, a friend from Bethlehem, and hopefully the third participant will join us in time. Let me get directly to the topic at hand. Well, sometimes you can answer such a question by saying both. You can say it is business as usual, namely there are clear patterns of continuity, and we are seeing developments that have not started on the 7th of October and are just continuing processes, characteristics that have been there, some of them for 56 years, some of them for 76 years, and some of them even for more than a century. And in a moment, I will point to these patterns of continuity, and I would mention what continues after the 7th of October in terms that I'm not sure that it's business as usual, but it's definitely nothing new. Maybe that's a better way of describing it. And then there are, of course, after such a monumental event, both what happened on the 7th of October and the Israeli reaction to the 7th of October are so dramatic and drastic that they also add new layers, new features for the never-ending conflict in historical Palestine. So let me start by talking about what patterns of continuity I detect in what we all have been watching and experiencing in the last 8 months. I think what hasn't changed in many ways is the very ideology of the State of Israel that for me is one of the main reasons, not exclusive reason, but one of the main reasons for the brutality that we are witnessing on the ground. As many of us have already written before me, and many of us have written before me, Zionism today is framed by many scholars as a settler colonial movement. And settler colonial movements are movements of refugees from Europe that settles in someone else's homeland. And as the late Patrick Wolfe, the great scholar of settler colonialism, said, settler colonial movements are motivated by the logic of the elimination of the native. Elimination in America, and both Americas, one should say, took the form of genocide. Also in Australia. In other places, it took the form of ethnic cleansing, apartheid. But there is an historical reality that cannot be brushed aside, that in order for a success of a project like Zionism and later the State of Israel to survive, it needs to constantly deal with the indigenous native Palestinian population. Ethnic cleansing and destruction, as we've seen recently in Gaza, have been used by the Zionist movement before 1948 and the State of Israel in 1948 as part of this wish. If I would simplify this wish, I would call it to have as much of historical Palestine as possible, with as few Palestinians in it as possible. Ironically, because the Zionist movement wanted both a Jewish state and a democratic state. And it cannot have a democratic Jewish state if it doesn't have a constant, exclusive Jewish majority. And all the means are justified in the eyes of Israel to get an exclusive Jewish majority, including ethnic cleansing, and as we have seen recently, genocide. The second feature, which has not changed in many ways, is that, as the Palestinians call it, they have been experiencing since 1948, throughout the years since 1948, and many of them would say also in the last 8 months, something that the Palestinians call in Arabic, al-Nakba al-Mustamira, the ongoing Nakba. This also, by the way, fits scholarly works on settler colonialism. We know that settler colonial movements are not resting until they fulfill their objectives. So if the Nakba, the 1948 catastrophe that Israel inflicted on the Palestinian people and ended with the expulsion of half of the Palestinian people and the taking over of almost 80% of historical Palestine, if this monumental event was not a completion of the Zionist vision, then naturally this kind of efforts continue after 1948. And we can see that while in 1948 the ethnic cleansing was monumental, as I said, because it left so many Palestinians in a situation of refugees and destroyed half of Palestine's villages and most of its towns, nonetheless, half of the Palestinian population still remained in historical Palestine. Many Palestinians remained near Palestine in refugee camp and exilic communities and started a struggle against their dispossession. And therefore, the Nakba continues in this sense that Israel still wants to control as much of Palestine as possible with as few Palestinians as possible, but it never succeeds in emptying the historical land of Palestine from its indigenous Palestinian population. So we have seen and the Gaza Strip is a good example of that, that when it's impossible to ethnically cleanse people, then Israel resorts to other means of achieving this aim of having a land without its native people, namely enclaving them in ghettos like the Gaza Strip, or in areas C in the West Bank, or even area B in the West Bank, expelling people not in huge numbers as in 1948, but nonetheless not stopping the expulsion of people. There is not one day since 1948 in which Israel did not expel individual Palestinians or large group of Palestinians. Imprisoning people without trial is also part of that kind of metrics of control, destroying their houses, destroying their livelihood, erecting a wall that separates them from their businesses, from their lands, from their universities and school, allowing settlers to take over the land, to harass them, to try and uproot them. All this is not new. This is the experience of Palestinians in various historical periods ever since Zionism appeared in Palestine in the late 19th century. The methods have changed with time, dependent on the historical circumstances, the capacity of the Zionist movement to implement its ideas of the elimination of the native, but the motive, the impulse was always there, and the result was always increasing the suffering of the Palestinians, making them either prisoners, refugees, wounded, or in many cases also victims of massive killing, executions, and indirect circumstances that led to their deaths because of lack of medical help, sustainable conditions of life, and other means that are at the disposal at those who rule their life directly or indirectly since 1948 for the Palestinian minority inside Israel, and since 1967 for all the Palestinians who live between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean. So it's business as usual, if you want, the business of oppression, the business of control, the business of dispossession, the business of ethnic cleansing, the business of genocide. That business, if one can use this terrible word, I didn't choose the title, but I'm going along with this, it's okay, has not changed over time. Also, the business of peacemaking has not changed. Of course, we didn't see it immediately on the 7th of October or in the immediate months after the 7th of October, but it's re-emerging. Again, the same discourse of peace, focusing on the two-state solution, talking about an American-led peace, a peace effort that has been attempted in the last 56 years, which did not only fail, did not lead anywhere, it actually produced even more difficult conditions of life for the Palestinians and produced more frustration on the Palestinian side. Because if you promise peace and instead you get more oppression, more settlement, more roadblocks, more imprisonment without trial, more demolition of houses, more killing and wounding of children, then peace becomes a word that actually is equivalent to providing Israel with international immunity to continue its policies. And this is business as usual if you listen to how EU leaders, the American administration, and everybody involved in the past and in the present in the so-called peace process are talking about peace. Totally irrelevant to the reality on the ground and totally irrelevant to what should be in the future. But I understand we will talk, the two other esteemed panelists will talk about it, so I will not go into this. Another business as usual, if you want, is the Palestinians' attempt to resist. Palestinians are not passive in front of the attempts to ethnically cleanse them, genocide them, dispossess them. Like any other anti-colonialist movement, the Palestinians were trying all methods at their disposal to liberate Palestine, to remove oppression, to end occupation, to resist ethnic cleansing. It's true that, and this is not new, that part of the Palestinian resistance movement became more religious, if you want, closer to political Islamic ideology and groups, but it's still an anti-colonialist movement. Most of the anti-colonialist movements in the Arab and Muslim world were a mixture of left, secular, and political Islamic groups working together to decolonize their countries and fight their wars of liberation. So even that is not new. The methods of resistance, well, we have it all and now, and we had it before. The Palestinians are willing to go along with the so-called peace process, to be again and again disappointed, feeling deceived, and losing the confidence of their people because this is not producing peace. And as I said, it does not only not produce peace, it produces more oppression. So there are those who try the armed struggle. Nothing new about that either. They have tried the armed struggle since the 1920s, when the colonization of Palestine by the Zionist movement had begun. So this is also, if you want, the business of resistance is as usual, but also resilience is as usual. Incredibly and amazingly, the people of Gaza are there, surviving under impossible circumstances. The people in the West Bank are resilient, are still there. The Palestinians inside Israel, the refugees, they're not going away. All the Israeli dreams of being able to eliminate the Palestinians from Palestine would fail because of the resilience, not just the resistance, or as they call it in Arabic, the sumud of the Palestinians. And Gaza is an incredible story of sumud. I mean, I don't think of any other historical example of people surviving, showing solidarity under an ethnic genocide that is already 8 months old. So this is all there, has been all there before. So what is the effect of this momentous historical event that creates a different kind of reality compared to the reality I've just described, a reality of settler colonialism, dispossession, apartheid on the one hand, resistance to it on the other hand, and an international community that its political elites are talking about peace and resolution with very little relevance to the reality on the ground. If I summarize, this is for me the last 76 years, and this is also the last 8 months in many ways. But what has changed? I think 3 major things have changed, and with this I would end, which were not there before. First of all, Palestine is back at the center focus of the international community. It hasn't been there for many, many years. It was pushed aside as an unimportant issue, as a boring issue, as an exhausting issue. People said, oh, we heard enough about it. It's back. It's back, and with full force, not only because of what's going on the ground, and this is new, because so many people, especially young people around the world, believe that the struggle for justice in Palestine is also their own struggle for justice in their own places. We had some indications of this before, but not on such a scale. I haven't seen it before. The left in the 70s tried to create such a link between the Palestinian struggle and the struggle in the third world for decolonization. But it was not as successful as the level of solidarity and commitment that all around the world people are showing with Gaza and Palestine as the most important issue of injustice in our time. And there are so many competing issues of injustice that can be considered as well, and yet Palestine gets the center stage on this. This is new. This is definitely new. Hasn't happened before. And all the things that Munir was talking about, the recognition of the Palestinian state and so on, these are all symptoms, including with the decision of the ICJ and the ICC. Something has changed in the way the international community deals with Palestine. Not at the level of political elites. They are still under the influence of the pro-Israeli lobby and other lobbies, and they are still providing Israel immunity, but they are feeling the swelling wave of solidarity from below. And I think it will eventually also engulf them, or at least some of them. So that's one thing which changes. Secondly, and this hasn't happened before, the 7th of October and the Israeli reaction suddenly broke down, disintegrated the structure which is called the State of Israel. It has totally broken it, economically, militarily, socially. The Israeli Jewish society lacks social cohesion. It finds it very difficult to build a base that is common to all Israeli Jews. Secondly, any one of their leaders has no vision for the future. They have nothing to promise to the younger Jewish generation. This is why, since the 7th of October, already 450,000, I repeat the number, 450,000 Israelis have left Israel since 7th of October, out of a population of 8 million. You can do the math yourself in terms of percentage compared to France or the US, you know, it's big numbers. Almost, and I believe that the number is much higher, This shows you that the lack of social cohesion means a disintegration of society. Secondly, the army, of course, has proved to be, is not invincible anymore. People keep asking themselves, what would have happened if the Hezbollah would have coordinated with Israel, with the Hamas, the attack on Israel? Is the Israeli army at all able to defend Israel? Economically, the crisis is growing. The government isn't there. The government is unable to provide any services for those who were evicted from the north and the south, for the families of those who were killed, wounded, or abducted. There's a sense that there is no government. Yes, in situations like this, there's a lot of brutality towards the Palestinian citizens, towards the Palestinians in the West Bank. Don't confuse fierceness and brutality with the viability of a state. In fact, as we had some brilliant analysis on fierce states, as we call them, states which are fierce, are usually states that find it very difficult to keep it together. And that's why they have to use so much violence in order to keep a state together. We have seen it in the last days of apartheid South Africa. It was very brutal and very fierce in its last days. And therefore, what has changed in this respect is that these internal implosion, these internal dynamics, are bringing us closer to the end of the Zionist project in Palestine. And this was not there before. This, I think, has been has been done by the events in the last 8 months. I'm not sure that the price the people of Gaza paid was worth it in order to do that. That's a Palestinian internal discussion, I'm sure, that will take place. But there's no doubt about the impact. There's no doubt about the impact on Israel. It's like a building that had cracks and suffered an earthquake, and now the cracks are so big that there is a danger for the building to collapse. Finally, Israel was already suffering from some isolation in the world, but I think the level of isolation now is unprecedented. And isolation can be actually a positive thing, and with this I will end. A collapse of a state can be disastrous, because I don't know if the Palestinian national movement is ready, united enough, consensual enough to take over. I have no idea. So collapse can create chaos, and chaos, as we have seen in the failed states of Syria and Libya, can go on for years, and everybody suffers. Doesn't matter whether you are the colonized or the colonizer. Chaos does not differentiate between people. But the international pressure can be a positive program that says we need a transition. We need a transition from a colonialist reality, a settler colonialist reality, an apartheid and genocide, to build a different kind of political structure, a win-win political structure for the colonized and the colonizer, but one that should be led by the colonized people, because up to now, the Palestinians never led any peace initiative or vision for the future. This is why the international pressure is so important. Pressure means involvement. Involvement means you're not leaving people by themselves. And I think this could be a very pivotal moment. The patterns of the past, the ghost of the past, will continue to haunt us in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm afraid to say, which means I don't expect a very good period in the short term. And I'm very worried about what Israel would do in the West Bank in particular in the next 3 years. But I do think that we are witnessing something much more positive in the long run, that there is a dawn there after this dark night, and there is a light in the end of the tunnel. And as whether people are afraid of the end of Israel or whether they are rejoicing by the end of Israel, this is the conversation we should have, not the two-state solution, not the artificial talking about peace that isn't there. We should talk about post-colonial Palestine, liberated Palestine. How does it look? How do Jews and Arabs live in it? How does it connect it to the Mashrek, the Eastern Mediterranean? How does it help to solve the problems of the Arab world and be part of the problems of the Arab world, not of Europe, not the West? It belongs to the Arab world. It belongs to the Muslim world. All this is a long-term process that I think we have for the first time a chance to ignite it after many years where we thought that we're dealing here with a Western state that needs the West to solve its problems. And this, of course, concept has totally collapsed and failed. So I don't know if I overrun my time, or if maybe Pilar is a very nice moderator and doesn't dare to stop people who are 55 years older than her. But I hope I haven't overstated my time. Thank you, Pilar.
Well, I have to confess, I lost track of time. I was, paying attention. It's so much,
Thank you.
So much to share there. Business as usual, business of control and genocide, or business of peacemaking that doesn't really impact, business of Palestinians to resist, business of resilient. But I think that we should take 3 points you made. Let's take the time that Palestine is now the center of the international community, and also the solidarity that people are showing from around the world. And let's not disestimate the 450 plus people who left Israel. It's also action that what is really, we all do what we can do, at our level. So with that, we go now to 10 minutes of questions and answers. Due to the large amount of questions, I probably will allow a couple of questions this time, and we will try to respond at the end of the session if it's possible. So our first question is coming from Oliver in France. Do you think that Israel is responsible for the instability in the Middle East? If so, how can I persuade her to change her approach?
Yes, thank you, Oliver, for your question. I think there are many reasons for instability in the Middle East, but I do think Israel contributes to them. In fact, Israel exploits the other reasons for instability because destabilized Middle East, Middle East that is full of conflict, prevents a united Middle East or united Arab world, which is Israel's fear that it might face a strong coalition against it. So definitely, I don't think Israel contributes to its stability. I think they are Israelis have for years, the Israeli policymakers benefited from the conflicts in the Arab world. A good example is the Sudan, where Israel provide arms both to the south and to the north in order to maintain the civil war there. I think the lack of solution for the Palestine issue is a destabilizing factor in the Arab world. The pushing of Palestinian refugees into neighboring Arab states is also destabilizing. Allying with the United States against some countries in the Middle East is also not bringing stability. Can it change? The second part of your question, Oliver, how do we persuade it? I hope that the non-violent means of boycott, divestment, pressure, sanctions would lead to a change. I'm not that optimistic because I think it's very difficult to change an indoctrinated society like the Jewish society in Israel, but it's definitely worth a trial, and we should try and pressure from the outside very strongly, as we did in the case of apartheid South Africa, so that the Middle East would be able to deal with the problems it faces without the influence of Israel. But as I say, even after that, the Middle East would still have its own issues to deal with stability, which are not all connected to the establishment of the State of Israel, but it definitely would make it much easier to deal with the other challenges.
Thank you, Professor Pappe. I have to honor time, so we will continue with our next speaker. She is a courageous woman that responded to our call. Sabrine Abdallah. She's a social and health rights advocate with over 10 years of experience in women's and youth health and community mobilization. She works with civil society organizations and holds 2 master's degrees, one in women's public health and the other in international cooperation and development. Sabrine is a member of the political bureau in the Palestinian Initiative Party and an activist with youth political engagement and capacity building. She will address the question, what needs to change to achieve a real peace process? Welcome, Sabrine.
Thank you, Pilar, for the introduction. And it is so interesting always to hear Prof. Ilan Pappe deconstructing the situation from your point of view, and it's so interesting. And as you asked me before we start, if I written something in my speech, and I said that I wrote some notes, I might change some of these notes after what we heard. However, I will start as I am presenting today with heavy hearts, and I am presenting today with the big responsibility of the voice of women, people who are not only suffering from the last 8 months, but as you said, Prof. Pappe, it have been like 75 years of suffering. But the past 8 months have been like so intense, with hundreds of massacre happening, with over than 37,000 martyrs, with over than 87,000 people who got injured, and knowing that those people might also suffer and may also face death because there's no treatment, no care. And this intense situation with around 1.7 million people who has been displaced from home, from their home, as a destruction of 360,000 housing units. When we were talking about hospitals, as 33 hospitals have been out of service, 25 of them only due to air missiles or missile strikes. That's intense, and that's a heavy heart to present ways to change, and what steps to change toward a peace process and peace building process. again, with having people stuck, like the vision and the picture of people stuck in the street, some of them in tent and some of them, the lucky one, in shelters and in tents that are set on fire and constantly bombarded. It is hard to talk about peace and about peace process and what change and what business as usual, and to understand this dilemma between the two of them. As a feminist and as a social activist and someone who worked in the health sector for several years, it's also hard to talk about peace with knowing that 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza do not have a safe place to give birth in, and 64,000 lactating women do not have the essential food, nutrition to keep living. And it's remind me that just before the war, I was in discussion with European parliamentarians where they were proudly talk about their feminist foreign policy and how to integrate it in the international collaboration and relationships. And now I'm shocked, like we're having the picture of Palestinian women in Gaza getting raped, getting strip searched, and facing all this gender-based violence fit in your agenda and fit in your policy and feminist foreign policy making. But as you said, Dr. Pappe, like something is going as usual. The resilience, this work with the communities, this community movement that we can see clearly in the streets among young people, among women with their steadfastness and resilience, like as Palestinian National Initiative Party, like a third party within the Palestinian community, that we worked for years with women and young people, trying to develop this capacity for a peace process. It need more and more to address whether it is business as usual or whether it's something new that we never witnessed before. As of course, Palestinian for years worked in this peace process. However, it was never easy, and it was never easy by all the means of Israeli occupation that kept building settlement, kept detaching cities and village from each other. So, and kept young people and women far from each other, make the communication, the building the community, the Palestinian community, and building the new youth generation, like a difficult process. And as of today, like how we can talk about the day after and any real steps toward peace process without stopping the genocide first, stopping the difficult and dire situation that people are living. Without that, it's just meaningful. And the apartheid that Israel is conducting, the racial discrimination, it offers no solution for the peace process. Like, it's only when a system where everyone is equal and everyone has equal right, then we can start talking about peace process and peace and justice. However, maybe I can share 7 steps how we as Palestinian National Initiative Party believe that these kinds of change within the community, this kind of change within supporting the local community can result by the end to a peace process and to a peace building a real peace building, which is first like supporting the independence of national development and combating the poverty, the answering the needs of people, and improving and supporting their steadfastness in their land, because for 75 years the infrastructure of the country, the infrastructure of the communities have been weakened by weakened economic situation, dire political situation, and limited access to the very, very basic needs of health and nutrition, quality education, etc. The second change is ensuring the role of law and ensuring a good governmental and independence of judiciary and achieving security and safety for the people, because without feeling of safety, without feeling of security, there will be no building of a real country and a real like stable situation, not just in Palestine, but also in the whole region. The other thing is combating the unemployment and combating the dire, again, economic situation, and providing workers and young people, those young people, with employment and with a good living situation. And achieving, of course, the role of Palestinian communities and diaspora members and solidarity from different communities and from different internationals. That can, as you said, Prof. Pappe, it will help the steadfastness of people. Achieving the liberation of Palestine is not only the responsibility of Palestinian people, it is also the responsibility of the people in the globe, because it is the fundamental humanitarian right and humanitarian dignity that we are all talk about. And maybe lastly is enhancing the role of independent civil society organization, because as a civil society organization member that I worked within the civil society organization for a long time, it is civil society who build the capacity of the local communities, who build the capacity of women and empower women and empower youth, either by knowledge, by skills, by strategic planning, thinking, critical thinking, that will make us think what is after what is the day after, and what's after ending this genocide that's happening on people. Maybe I will wrap it here, and I hope I'm not exceeding the time, but over to you, Pilar and Munir, for any.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that reality of Palestine and the struggles from a women's perspective. I think it's your participation is very valuable here to bring that balance. Questions. We have a question for Nerina from Italy. Palestinian people should have the right to have a say on their vision of peace, justice, freedom, and self-determination in Palestine. Isn't it time to stop making decisions over their heads?
Decisions over what? Sorry?
Over their heads,
Over their heads.
Maybe...
Yeah. Okay, first, again, to talk about the decisions, and I know that maybe the dialogue now is about who will rule Gaza after the end of occupation and who will. It's not about governing Gaza or governing the West Bank. It's about governing the Palestinian people who will be living in Gaza and the West Bank. And who will have the say for that? Of course, the Palestinian, because Palestinians know who will rule the country, their people, their own people. And to talk about making the right decisions and making the wrong decisions, it's a democracy. And when we are talking about the democracy, then democracy role and to achieve the democracy, first, normal situation or close to normal situation should be on the land to be able to practice our very basic right of democracy and choosing the one who will rule the Palestinian people.
Thanks. Ines from United Kingdom is asking, what space have women in Gaza and Palestine to contribute to peace and justice?
Yeah, let me tell you that Palestinian women are good, empowered, and strong women in defending their positions and rights in politics. I'm only 35 years old, and I am a member in the higher political bureau in the third largest party in Palestine. So women of Palestine are empowered and they are strong to take their positions in the political sphere. But again, all this democratic process, all this women taking their positions, and to be honest, this is business as usual for Dr. Ilan Pappe, because for years, since the very first Intifada and since the Nakba, women, like Palestinian women, took their lead and took their position in a very higher positions in the struggle and in defending Palestine and Palestinian land. So of course they are empowered, and they will take their positions in the peace process.
Thank you. We have a participant who asks, how could we raise awareness about the difficulty of survival for women in Gaza, not only pregnant women, but women in general?
Yes. You know, 680,000 women are in the reproductive age in Gaza now. And they are all basic needs of their not only reproductive health, but as you said, in their health in general, their situation in general. Many of them are now household, like they are in charge of their household because their partner passed away, their family gone. So to be able to raise awareness, first, everyone who work in health, in women's sector, in any social and political sector should be vocal about what is really happening in Palestine for women, and addressing that. And second, media and social media has to take their role in spreading the awareness and in raising the awareness about situation. Many women in Gaza now have been really vocal, sharing their daily stories and sharing the situation that they are faced day to day. And maybe it is not maybe, for sure, we have to focus on these on-ground stories that reflect the reality of the situation.
Thanks. We have a question here from Amadullah Farhat. How can we protect Hamas, Gaza, and all Palestinians from the extremist influence of the Iranian regime?
Who are we?
Yeah, good question. Who are we? Okay, maybe
because if we
can clarify, in questions and answers. Meanwhile, I want to read a question from Alison from the United Kingdom. How can global civil society play a more effective role in the UN?
Of course, when we are talking about civil society is the real power of each state. It represents the people, and it represents the community of these states. So each civil society has to put pressures on their states, because then states can transfer such advocacy on the UN to first legislate the regulations and the measures, the preventional and provisional measures on the Israeli forces to stop the genocide and to end and to cease the fire now permanently, not for a short period. And second, they are the one who donate the projects and who donate the money and who allocate the resources that make it more, not easier, like that make it more, that facilitate, let me say, facilitate the surviving process that will lead to the peace process eventually.
Thank you. What is the role of education in the peacemaking process?
I can say a bit about our role as PNI in building the capacity and raising the educations of our members first and the local communities in regards to the history of the Palestinian cause, and raising awareness about the sources like ICJ, like the international bodies, and building the knowledge of young Palestinian generation in particular, but also women and also other generation, about the history, because somehow history repeats itself, and somehow we all learn from our own history. So mainly the education is about building the capacity and the knowledge about the history, but also building the capacity and the knowledge of the strategic and the current situation and the goals for the Palestinian country in the future. It is like done mainly through educational material that we are distributing to young people, educational session, different channels.
I have a more, let's say, practical and meaningful question for many of the participants here is, how can the individual, each one of us at our individual level in the different parts of the globe can help to the situation?
Yeah. So first, as I said, stay vocal and talk about the Palestinian cause. Talk about what's happening in Palestine. Second, participate in the community-based movement like boycotting and divestment, like a student movement in the campuses, because this puts economic pressure on the Israeli government, and this has its impact on them. The third one is advocate your government, and advocate any civil society organization, UN representative organizations at your states on putting pressure to end and to cease the fire, to end this genocide and cease the fire permanently. No mini truce, no small temporary ceasefire here and there. Like, how many thousands should be killed more to stop and to end this genocide, and to stop and to cease the fires permanently?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that this initiative, this conference is also calling us for awareness, for acknowledgement, for action, to speak up, to continue clarifying what our position is and speak up, defending not only the people in Palestine, but as it has been said here before, humanity. Because it is now our moral responsibility, to
Yeah.
search for peace, to open channels for peace, to try to learn more what is happening and how will we respond our own scale in our own world.
Yes.
So as we wait for our next speaker to join, I will open the floor for Professor Pappe and for you, Sabrine, to, any other ideas that you want to share? Professor Pappe, where are you? Is he here?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is the question?
The question is, if you have anything else to add,
You
after
want us to pass
listening.
time until Professor Zatz is coming. I have many stories to tell you. That's okay. And I can speak for hours.
Absolutely,
Not a problem.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think Sabrine really covered well the questions. It's very clear that we are facing an historical moment of huge proportions, but we are not just observers. We are also participants. And the various processes that we are observing, and I think we should participate, are different and depend on where we are. I think if we are Palestinians, and I think Sabrina has already mentioned it, I think probably Palestinians have to understand how important this moment is. I'm not sure it will repeat itself in history. They really have a chance of creating a different reality in Palestine. And maybe this is not just because of what happened on the 7th of October, maybe it's an accumulation of processes. And maybe this is the result of the hard work of the resistance and resilience movement ever since the 1920s. Whatever the reason is, we'll leave it for historians to later on try to understand why we are where we are. There's no question where we are. Maybe there will be a question why we are where we are, but there's no question where we are. And without a united Palestinian national movement, which, by the way, cannot only include the people of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, it has to include the Palestinian refugees, it has to include the exilic communities, it has to include the Palestinians inside Israel. All these groups were totally excluded from the peace process by the Oslo Accord and the Western idea of what is peace for Palestine. We need to brush aside this paradigm that the West, led by America, offered us for peace and allow the Palestinians, first of all, to build their unity, the consensus organizations, and then tell us, the Palestinians have to tell us, what is your vision for the future? How do you see the Jews living in that vision, in this decolonized Palestine? This is what the Palestinians, I think, have in front of them. Those of us around the world, I think we failed to persuade our policymakers to reflect our wishes with regard to Palestine. They are not abiding by what the vast majority of us around the world, doesn't matter anymore if it's the global south or the global north, what we want them to do about Israel and Palestine. And they are totally ignoring it. They are now also ignoring the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, which finally had the courage to reflect what the people wanted and not just what the government wanted. It's still, we'll see, the governments are threatening them not to abide by what the people want. So this is a really important moment beyond Palestine. What is politics? Do people have any right to determine politics, or only politicians have the right to determine politics? This is a crucial moment for humanity. This far beyond Palestine. It has to do with ecology, with poverty. We have the worst kind of politics humanity has ever experienced in this century. Our leaders, doesn't matter whether it's France or Britain, the United States, I'm not discriminating here, Pakistan, really, not to mention India and Israel. We have the worst leaders we ever had, apart from few exceptional cases. I don't remember such a low quality of leaders. We don't have leaders. We have rulers. We don't have leaders. And without leadership, there is no way that this globe will deal with the most important issues in front of it. Because these issues are not local. They are global. And they are interconnected. So I think this is why Palestine is talking so loudly as a case of justice for so many people. And for us who are Israeli Jews like myself, we have a huge, almost an impossible task to try and persuade the Israeli Jewish society from within. It's a great help that the Jews around the world are stopping seeing themselves as Zionists. That's a great help. And I think that will help us eventually also to create dynamics to show our Israeli friends and compatriots that this is a better situation for them as well. In a prison, both the prisoner and the jailer are in prison. And we need to get everyone out of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Listening to all the speakers I say this morning, for some of you this evening, it's always that challenge at a personal level of how much have I done, what else I can do. So I hope that all these conversations are inspiring for all of us to see what else I can do, how much do I know, how much I can open doors and build bridges for people to learn more about the situation, to act, just at the end of this, what did I do for the conflict, for this crisis? I don't want just to be blind to whatever happened. I just talk. So I think that's very important for all of us. So let me see if we have any more questions that I can. Here we have Andrew James is asking, how can there be recognition of a Palestinian state if that state will not recognize its cohabitant?
Yeah, but first and foremost, it's a matter of now getting the recognition. And cohabitant, you mean that the occupation has been ended, just so they can be cohabitant. Once the occupation end and both countries have their sovereignty, have their borders, have their governance, then it's a matter of recognition of cohabitants. And as I told before, in my presentation about the apartheid system, and without having equal right, without having sovereignty and governance, it's so hard to talk about recognition or cohabitant, or you understand what's the point?
Sure.
So yeah, but after having the recognition, after having this sovereignty, after ending this dire and difficult situation, horrible situation that's going on, then it's a matter of the borders, what kind of borders, what kind of relationship. As I told you, it's too early now to talk about the day after without ending what's going on now. Of course, eventually it's a two-state solution. It is as like two countries, but again, it's so hard to talk about what can be the shape of two-state solution with having this West Bank disconnected among each other and having this illegal settlers spread all over the West Bank. What kind of two-state and or cohabitant countries that are living next to each other that we are talking about?
Yeah, the vision that we should have, it's hard to create that vision in the present conditions. However, that vision is needed in order to understand towards where are we walking. We have a question from Martin and Spencer Brown. The NGOs and UN agencies have also suffered. Their voice needs to be present, and international institutions towards governments and even in negotiations, just like diplomats. Is this no one way of getting around godless politicians?
Well, we hope it does, but no, I don't think it. Unfortunately, this is not enough, but it should be done. Namely, we are in a process that will take time to persuade the political elites to take action. And every aspect that, like the aspect that you mentioned in your question, is important to show that the public sentiment about Palestine is based on facts, is based on knowledge. What is so incredible about the Israeli propaganda is that it makes two claims that its supporters, unfortunately, in the world are still accepting. One claim it makes is that the Palestinian suffering is exaggerated and is not as bad as people say, and that Israel has the most moral army in the world, that it is using very clinical weapons and so on. And they are surprised that it is not convincing anyone, because this is all televised. This is all witnessed daily on our small screen and big screen. So that's one claim, the claim that the world is being misinformed about the suffering of the Palestinian. And I don't think anyone with a modicum of decency and knowledge in them accept this Israeli explanation. And then there is the other claim that the most important human rights organization working in Palestine, UNRWA, is part of a terrorist organization, the Hamas, a totally baseless, ugly kind of accusation and allegation against the only international human rights organization that helped to sustain the Palestinians for 17 years under the brutal Israeli siege. And therefore, I'm afraid that there are either two explanations here for the political elites' readiness to accept these two false claims. Either they believe in them, which I find hard to accept, or they know that they are not correct, but for cynical reasons, tend to accept them. Very difficult to know. Very, very difficult to know. I just finished a book called Lobbying for Zionism Across the Atlantic, writing the history of the Zionist lobby for the last 100 years, both in Britain and in the United States. And I think that gives a very good explanation why politicians who might be educated, well-informed, when it comes to Israel, they just act like puppets of the pro-Israeli lobby. This has to do with a very long history of lobbying and advocacy, a very effective machinery of lobbying that brought the Balfour Declaration in 1917 and the Biden Declaration in 2024, and in between all the other declarations of Western leaders that provided unconditional immunity for the criminal policies of Israel on the ground.
How much does the public really get the news of what is happening?
You mean where? In Israel or
around the world? How much really,
yeah.
I mean, people
yeah,
are
around the
well-informed?
world. Yeah, I'm sorry, maybe Sabrine wants to answer. I just say very briefly would say, around the world, I think people know a lot. That's why it was so easy for the students to galvanize so much support for the encampments and protests. And before the students, let's remember, London had witnessed a demonstration of 1 million people in support of Gaza. So it means people know. People knows not so much because of the CNN or the BBC or France 24, but because of Al Jazeera, Al Arabi, and a lot of alternative media that brings us a far better picture. What is so interesting is how the people of Gaza themselves became the reporters. This is incredible. We know what's happening mostly because the people of Gaza understood that they have to record what's happening to them. And they keep doing it. And we get from them authentic description and life sometimes a recording of what's going on. And therefore, I don't think people do not know. The one place where people, and I can say it with confidence because I'm there, Israelis don't know anything of what goes on in Gaza. Their television doesn't show them one picture of the destruction. They have no idea. And now Israel closed Al Jazeera, so you cannot watch Al Jazeera in Israel. The Israelis really don't know. I don't know if it would have mattered if they knew or not, but I cannot test it because I know that they don't know, you know. But I think anywhere else in the world, people are fully aware of what goes on.
I would
Thank
say
you.
also the same. They are fully aware, but not about everything. Like there's a lot of stories are still missing. There's a lot of facts are still missing, and I can tell it from like communication with other peers and other academic personnel. Like I know for sure that young people, the younger generation who are always on their phones, know more, way more than anyone else. But I know also that not all the pictures not all the picture are there. And thank you, Prof. Pappe, for mention it up as how Gazan people become their own storyteller and their own reporter for themselves. And this is what give it the genuine story and the genuine picture of the whole situation. Yes, fully agree.
Thanks. One of our last speakers in session one, Dr. Alan Leal, he mentioned that it's difficult for Israelis and Palestinians to find themselves in the same room for constructive negotiations, and solutions needs to come from international community. What is your perspective on that? Do you feel the same?
Alon is a good friend, but I tend to disagree with him. I think that we need a paradigm shift. The paradigm we had until now is what some people ironically would call the kissing cousin paradigm. Namely, the Israelis and Palestinians who would have to talk between themselves to find a solution. This was the basis of all the so-called peace efforts until today, which had totally failed. I think that now it's less the time of talking about bringing the two sides to talk together and rather adopt the paradigm of apartheid South Africa. Before the people can talk with each other, the world has to pressure Israel to stop its policies of genocide, destruction. There is no room now to talk about peace, if you want, before we talk about a clear message from the world that the way Israel's policies are conducted, the way Israel defines its own ideology, it's not just the policies, how it's defined its own ideology, for example, through its nationality law of 2018, is unaccepted in 2024. So I think this is far more important. After you do that, the second stage to my mind is the Palestinians telling us how they see the future and how they see the Israelis in that future. And then the Israelis can respond to this. Up to now, all the peace plans were American-Israeli peace plans, and the Palestinians were asked to respond to them. This was a total failure, a total failure. And this is what we should do now. So the question is not so much whether the international community imposes. I don't believe the international community should impose on the Palestinian a solution. That's what they have tried to do for 56 years. That's why we had uprisings. That's why we had the 7th of October. No, we don't want an international imposition of a solution. With this, I totally disagree with Alon. I think we need an international community that says to Israel, you will be a pariah state unless you abide by international law, unless you respect international human rights law. Otherwise, you are not part of the community of civilized nations. And then see with the Palestinians where we go from there. So the imposition should be in order to stop the ruthless attack on the Palestinians, not in order to impose a solution. That will never work, to my mind.
Yes, and maybe there is a step in between of these two steps. Like, first, I agree with you, hold accountability, hold Israel accountable for their work and continue what South Africa started. Second is balancing the power. Recognitions of land, recognitions, like balancing, because there will be no negotiation without balancing of this power. Third, arranging the Palestinian house first, unifying all the parties. And this is our main strategy in PNI. Like, without unity among the Palestinians themselves, it cannot, we can't go out and decide what kind of country or what's the shape of our governance will be. So these three steps, and then yes, Palestinians choose their own solution, choose the solution without being imposed on them. Yes, I agree.
So a question from John Bond from UK is, where can Israelis and Palestinians talk with each other about their future? Does it have to be outside of the country? Can organizations like Initiatives to Change create safer space for such conversations? Can we lead those conversations? Lead the spaces?
Well, people have tried for years to provide spaces. The EU invested, I don't know the number, but a huge amount of money in something called People to People that was a part of the pathetic Oslo Accord. And I don't think, again, I'm coming to this idea of spaces for people talking together. It's not the time for this. I really don't think this is the time for this. There will be, definitely, there will be a time for this. When genuine reconciliation will be considered, when we will know, as Sabrine has put it, when the Palestinians have put their house in order, then we can start talking and see what we are talking about. Or as Sabrine said, when we are redressing the imbalance of power, then really it's not so matter where to speak, but about what to speak. I don't think the question was never where to. The where is not important to my mind. What is important is what are you talking about? And right now, given the mentality of the Israeli Jewish society, given the DNA of the Israeli Jewish society, there's no one to talk to on the Israeli side at this moment in time. Maybe the trauma of 7th of October later on would be digested more properly by the Israelis. For example, they would understand the limits of power, and maybe that would, redress some of the imbalance of power. But where we are now, what you need is not a dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians. You need a dialogue between the world and Israel, putting it into order, putting it into the place where it should be because of its constant violation on a daily basis and for years of the basic civil and human rights of the Palestinians. That's what we need now.
Thanks. We have more and more questions coming. So Anthony Vallion, do the Geneva Accords of 2003 with agreed land swaps for settlements and compensation offer a workable model for a two-state solution?
For me, I think it's the same scenario as the previous questions. Like, we can talk about old tools and bring the old tools up and using them the same way and expecting different result within the situation that is completely different about like from any other situation. So it's like we can't pick up any older tool from our toolkit that we used before in a different situation and try to use it now. It won't work, because again, it's a different scenario, different situation. And like, it's not a matter of what tool we are using before deconstructing what is now. Like, you can't use like a scissor to cut a rock until deconstructing this rock. I don't know if this metaphoric like make you picture it, but it's not usable for now.
Yes, I agree. And I would add to this that the Geneva initiative did not have the element of equality in it. And any peace plan that does not have a strong stress on equality between Palestinians and Jews, between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean, is not a proper peace proposal. And you have to work hard for equality, because it's not just that people wake up the next day and say, oh, we're now all equal. In order to create equality, you have to dismantle institutions that were responsible for the inequality, to get rid of laws that institutionalized equality, create socioeconomic realities that enable equality. It's a huge project of making equality. And all Geneva did was dealing with where will be the border between Palestine and Israel. The question is not where is the border. The question is there a different kind of vision of equality and rectification of past evils? And none of the peace plans offered by politicians until today has even begin to address these aspects. And usually when we bring them up, they say to us, oh, you're naive, you don't understand politics, you're a dreamer, you're utopians. Well, at least our utopians haven't killed anyone. Their peace plans are responsible for the deaths of many, many people.
Thank you very much, Pilar. I think Jeffrey Sachs has joined.
Very good. So we will.
I have.
Welcome, Professor.
Yes.
Great.
We will
Thank you.
finish this time of sharing, and we will welcome now our last speaker for this session, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and he will share his vision in finding the pathways to peace. Professor Jeffrey Sachs is a world-renowned economics professor and public policy analyst, known for his work on the fight to end poverty and on the peaceful resolution of global conflicts. He's the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University and president of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. He's a special advisor to the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres and an advocate of the Sustainable Development Goals, a set of 17 goals that probably all of us know adopted at a UN summit meeting in September 2015. He writes frequently in publications throughout the world, calling for an end to the war in Gaza and the recognition of the Palestinian statehood. So welcome, and Professor Sachs, and it's an honor to have you here.
Well, the honor is for me. I greatly appreciate the chance to be with everybody, and I apologize for being late, which I very much am. The truth is very simple. I didn't look at my calendar this morning. I'm away with my family celebrating a grandson's third birthday, and I just didn't look at the calendar. So with real apologies. Let me just say a few words, and then I hope engage in discussion. A few words about what I hope will happen and what I think can happen in the coming months in this absolutely horrendous situation that we're seeing. I think the world community, as I see it at the United Nations each day, is more united than ever in favor of a basic proposition, and that is the two-state solution based on the 1967 borders, the capital of the state of Palestine in East Jerusalem, and Palestine's control of the Islamic holy sites. Of course, this does not cover all issues, as the great historian Ilan Pappe was just saying, and I don't mean to suggest that many complex issues are even being addressed right now. But I do think that the world is closer than ever to implementing the partition of this land as was first envisioned in 1947 at the UN, and I think 10 years before that by the Peel Commission in the British mandatory period, and that this actually can be achieved. The government of Israel, the current government, and probably most of the people of Israel, although we certainly don't know that, and that's a movable proposition, are against this idea. The current government is dead set against it. Netanyahu's purpose throughout all his period in politics has been to prevent the emergence of a sovereign state of Palestine. I think it's right to say that many of his cabinet colleagues, senior cabinet colleagues, like the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, like Ben-Gvir, are even more radical and violent than Netanyahu, although I don't want to quibble as to who's worse. They're all horrible, in my view. Their whole purpose is to block a state of Palestine. Indeed, it is to create a greater Israel with full control over the land from the river to the sea. And this is not hidden. This is most explicit. And it is the essence of what is happening right now. This crisis did not start on October 7. It's at least 100 years old. And it involves the question of how this land is going to be shared or allocated. And the answer of the current Israeli government is it won't be. We will be in full control. The United States political system really, since the founding of Israel, has been steadfast in backing the governments of Israel, one after another, with some notable events that are a little bit an exception to that. But I think that Biden falls into the general pattern of being in lockstep with the Israel lobby, and he is trained as a politician and trained himself over 50 years never to deviate from the Israel lobby, and this is what we're observing. But what I observe that is positive is that other than the United States and Israel, there is essentially no opposition in the world to the two-state solution on the terms that I described. Again, 1967 borders, capital in East Jerusalem, control of the Islamic holy sites. This seems to be a universal consensus except for Israel and the United States, which loyally backs Israel. This, to my mind, is extremely notable because it means that either the U.S. Continues to support Israel, irrespective of its genocide, irrespective of its war crimes, irrespective of the extraordinary losses, irrespective of the dangers of a world war spreading from this, which is absolutely real. or the U.S. comes to understand politically that almost complete isolation in the world, basically isolation in the world over this is not to America's interest. And what is, I believe, happening is that vivid reality is becoming clearer and clearer. The U.S. Typically, of course, has essentially unconditionally backed Israel, no matter how radical or extreme the demands. And during the past two administrations, Trump and Biden, the idea has been that the Arab states can be bought off one after another to normalize relations with Israel while allowing Israel to pursue this radical extremist agenda. And of course, the centerpiece of that has been the belief by both Trump and Biden that Saudi Arabia can be bought off. And when Saudi Arabia is bought off to normalize relations with Israel, this crisis ends because Israel is then secure as Greater Israel. Palestine essentially disappears one way or another, either in sustained apartheid or ethnic cleansing or continued massacres. But one way or another, the issue becomes moot. And this has been Biden's belief. And it is the tactic of Jake Sullivan and Blinken and the US security establishment, as I understand it, that they would negotiate with Saudi Arabia, that the price would be F-35s, a defense agreement, nuclear technology, and on that basis, the kingdom would normalize relations with Israel and the Palestine issue would become moot because no Arab states would essentially oppose the Saudi decision to put an end to that issue. I think that this has failed. It was profoundly cynical and I think fundamentally naive. I cannot feel, not only I have, of course, profound distaste for American foreign policy leaders, including our president and his team, but I also don't have any admiration for their intelligence, their tactics, their calculations. I don't find them very bright, and I find them filled with their own hubris and wishful thinking. So I never believed that the Saudis were on the verge of normalizing relations and abandoning the Palestinian cause, because as a leader, one of the leaders of the Arab world, I think that this is not an acceptable position for the Saudi leadership, and certainly not for the Arab world more generally. I think we are seeing that reality more clearly than ever. Each day, the administration says we're close to an agreement with the Saudis, and that is followed almost every day by a statement by the Saudi government, we're not close because there needs to be a state of Palestine. Of course, the US is also hoping in its inimitable arrogance that what the US will propose and the Saudis will accept is a peace process like Oslo that would be another dead end after a few years, but that the Saudis cynically would accept it, and that would be not a direct sellout of the Palestinian people, but de facto a sellout, because we know that a peace process is a complete illusion. Essentially, the United States position that anything that happens has to be agreed by Israel is nothing more than saying nothing will happen, because Israel will never agree to a sovereign state of Palestine. So this has been the game. This was Biden's game all along. Now, I said that I think it can change, and I think it can change for a few reasons. One is that the weight of the global political community is now overwhelming. The US stood alone in the UN Security Council in vetoing the resolution for UN membership of Palestine. The US stood with 9 countries out of the 193 UN member states when the same proposition was taken up in an advisory way by the UN General Assembly the following week. The 9 states in general, well, it was Israel and the US. It was, to my dismay or unhappiness, Hungary and Czech Republic, which should know better. It was Argentina under Milei, which doesn't know better. And it was a few small islands. The rest of the world, the overwhelming majority of humanity, spoke very clearly in the General Assembly as well. But what we're seeing, so one point is that isolation. The second point is that we've seen a massive shift of US public opinion away from Israel and to Palestine. And this is, of course, especially true with young people. And I'm especially proud of our students. I'm very proud of Columbia University because our students took the lead in this. I find it utterly sad that our administration was no more clever than to call the police on the students and to expel the students and suspend the students. This is very primitive behavior. We understand it. The powers that be, the Israel lobby, the major donors, nobody wants to hear pro-Palestinian positions, but the fact of the matter is young people support Palestine over Israel in the current struggle and see both the injustice and the genocide taking place. And this is going to be very consequential in the election as well. Not that Trump is any better, he's probably worse, though we don't know, but Biden is so awful that young people will not turn out to vote for him. So I see a kind of pincers movement, a near unanimity of the world community, an opposition by the American public, which doesn't have a major role in foreign policy, but once in a while has to be listened to a little bit by our politicians who are corrupt and brazen and not very smart, but they have to listen a little bit to their constituencies at the same time. And I see these two movements as playing a key role. But the third dimension that I think will prove to be decisive is Arab unity. If there is Arab unity in favor of this outcome, 2 states, 1967 borders, East Jerusalem as the capital, in line with the overwhelming view of the world community, I think it will happen if the Arab world stays together on this and is not divided by the United States machinations. And I think that is increasingly likely to be the case. Of course, the Arabs stated this very clearly in 2002 in the Arab Peace Initiative. After the Israeli invasion of Gaza, after October 7, the October 7 attack by Hamas, the Arab and Islamic leaders met in Riyadh and made a declaration that reiterated the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative. They stuck with it very clearly. They said, look, we can have normalization, we can have peace, we can have security for both states, but there needs to be a sovereign state of Palestine on the 1967 borders. Very clear. Then the United States, Jake Sullivan and Amos Hochstein and all of these geniuses went to work to try to tear off Saudi Arabia from this consensus among the Arab and Islamic leaders. They have failed. I think Israel has united the Arab and Islamic world because of the horrific behavior of Israel. And most recently, the meeting of the Arab League in Bahrain, I think, was an extremely important meeting from my own perspective, because once again, the Bahrain Declaration is extremely clear. It says there is one solution, there is a path to peace. It is the two-state solution on the terms that I've described. And what's more, the UN General Assembly, which can't be stopped by the United States, has backed a global conference to put this into effect. And this raises one final consideration. The US does not call the shots in the world anymore. Not only is it isolated, but there's China, there's Russia, there's the African Union, there's President Lula, there is the Arab League. And the US does not stand above all of them as the almighty force that overcomes all of this. What we're seeing is that after the Bahrain meeting, the King of Bahrain immediately went to Moscow, met with President Putin, and President Putin gave support for this global conference to establish a state of Palestine and the two-state solution. The King of Bahrain then went with the President of Egypt and other Arab leaders to Beijing. This is very significant. Met with President Xi, who made a very clear call for a state of Palestine. And so I see that in the midst of this horror, actually, we're coming very close to a diplomatic outcome of a kind that can truly lead to peace. I'll stop there just to say, Ilan Pappe, he's our greatest historian of all of this. He can tell us all the obstacles, the pitfalls, and so forth. But from my point of view, on the ground level, what I'm seeing in world diplomacy is very promising. And I see a world community coming together. And I like that, because the world is potentially so disastrously divided. When we have the world come completely together, except for the United States and Israel, 191 countries coming together, maybe at least a 192nd will come in line and stop blocking the path to peace.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Sachs, for your sharing today. You are the last speaker of 6 speakers today from around the world. And it's a community here that we have gone from history through responsibility of Britain and the Western countries, and action for peace, and recognition of Palestine, and what does it mean, the role of the international community, to now finish with you and your intervention based on daily life experience with the United States, which is a key element on all these conversations. So we have questions. Usually we have 10 minutes for questions and answers. It's only now like 6 minutes left. So I will share some of the questions that were asked. The first one will be, what will it take to ensure that a Palestinian state is economically viable? And it's greetings from Oxford from Graham Jones. What will it take to ensure that a Palestinian state is economically viable?
I think the most important point would be peace, security, contiguity of East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza, a good, lively port in Gaza, Palestinian control over the natural gas in its economic zone. And then I believe there would be ample opportunity actually for a lot of development, because there are so many talented professionals in Palestine. There is so much capacity, and the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East has a lot of funding and a lot of money to actually build. So you can't do this if there's not physical contiguity and peace and security. But if there is, I think that there's no reason to believe that the state of Palestine would be different from other Eastern Mediterranean countries. And indeed, it has an advantage of the gas. I'm not a huge fan of fossil fuel, but under the circumstances, this is probably going to play some role. And there will be a lot of investment from the Gulf as well.
How do you envision the reconstruction of Gaza?
Oh my God. Well, the first rule is stop destroying as soon as you can, because the destruction is horrific. The displacement is unbelievable. And of course, no one's thinking about the reconstruction in that context. So I don't have a plan. I know that Israel's and Jared Kushner and others have their plans. They're not my plans of displacing all of the people on some vague pretext, which could very likely turn into the next ethnic cleansing. We need a plan that is really based on Palestinian sovereignty, safety for the people of the region, and then an infrastructure, a master plan, because all the infrastructure has been destroyed.
Yes. 3 minutes left of our time, and I would like to invite our other two speakers. If you feel responding to this last question, how can spiritual leaders better impact the peacemaking process? Is there any role there?
If I may say, I've been involved in a number of interreligious discussions of this point where the Pope, the Grand Imam of Al-Aqsa, and many other religious leaders have spoken very clearly of the need for peace along these lines. I frankly would like to hear more rabbis speak in this way. I think it's extremely important, and we don't hear enough of those voices.
Professor Pappe,
Maybe I didn't get the question, but I thought it's a leader, not particularly a religious leader, or
I thought
it was a
religious,
religious leader. The question was about the role of religious leader.
Yeah. Then I am with you, Doctor. Yes, of course. Yeah, it is like maybe to talk about religious leaders. It is important, as you said, to see their positions in the peace process and in the outcome of this process, of course.
I definitely spiritual leaders, religious and otherwise, are important, I think, to give the infrastructure, the moral infrastructure for the discussion, which will be more practical. And the kind of dirty word that was always taken out of the American peace process, justice, has to be reintroduced. And I think we need moral and spiritual leaders to reintroduce justice as a value and as an objective. And of course, materially, we will need to find the economic resources and the natural resources to rebuild after so many years of destruction. But this cannot be done only in Palestine and Israel. I mean, we have failed states around us, Syria, Lebanon. Jordan is still holding on, but also quite a precarious condition. So yes, the kind of reintegration of these spiritual impulses for justice, morality on the one hand, and the practical leaders of high level that can also help build the practical infrastructure that will make life sustainable. for everyone, and bring an end also to the refugee situation, which is not only in Palestine. We still have many, many refugees in Iraq and Syria, in Lebanon. This is not sustainable from a human point of view. And so I don't believe in this kind of connecting the future of the Mashriq and the future of Palestine. I think that goes hand in hand, and it is both a spiritual challenge and a very practical economic political.
Thank you. Well, words cannot express the gratitude of Initiatives for Change, for all of you taking your time, sharing your talents, getting out of the birthday party and joining us here. But we are really grateful. I will pass the word to Mr. Munir so you can wrap up our session now.
Muted?
You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Maria del Pilar Griffin, for your excellent moderation. Thank you, dear guest speakers, for your outstanding sharing and honest conversation. Thank you, dear participants, for joining and supporting Voices of Justice and Peace. Thank you, IOFC community, for having been actively supporting justice and peace for the last couple of years for Middle East until the preparation of this conference. Thank you, our dream team working behind the scenes, Alina, Diana, Hidayah, Igor, Ismar, Jean-Louis, John, Marwa, Monder, Rebecca, Rodrigo, and all those who contributed. Thank you all for being on the right side of history. This is the beginning of a constructive conversations towards justice and peace in the Middle East. Let's not leave all the media space to propaganda. There is no peace for humanity without peace for Palestinians and Israelis. Same causes are more likely to produce same consequences everywhere. Let's address the root causes with justice and fairness. One quick word about Gaza relief support. In Gaza, famine is setting in, and those who have managed to flee to Egypt have lost everything. IOFC International is collecting funds through our website, iofc.org, for those who are in the greatest need and who we can reach. This aid is a lifeline for many. Every donations matter. Now, next session is planned in a week from now. We will confirm few days in advance. With our best wishes to each of you for a great weekend. Thank you again and see you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.